Welcome, everyone. It is another week here on the Enough to Keep Going podcast on the E2KG network. I'm glad to be here. This is Enough to Keep Going, episode 77 for the week of January 22nd, January 21st, January 22nd. We've got a wrap up of news. This is our deep dive episode. Last week we had our gaming experience as we wrapped up some of our good or at least interesting games from the holiday season. And now we've got some time to talk about some news stories. And joining me tonight is Osiris Prime. How are you, sir?
I am doing well. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Are you along with most of the country in the frigid air at this stage in the game?
Yeah, it's starting to get there. Yeah, it'll be
Starting
pretty
to get
cold here in
there.
single digits soon.
Oof. Yeah, I guess that is what January brings for
Yeah,
that bear country up there.
winter
So,
is here.
excellent, excellent. And along with us tonight is Agasicles Stamos. Someday I'm going to get this right on my first try, but tonight is not one of those nights. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Good, yeah. Shades of 2018, apparently, there, as you attempted to say that name. Yeah, I'm good. I want to buy the Alien Resurrection Blu ray box set, but that seems to be a difficult thing to do. So that's where I am right now.
Okay. Well, that was unexpected. No,
I'm sorry, not Alien Resurrection, the Alien franchise.
the
Blu-ray box set.
franchise. Okay.
Yeah.
So does that franchise box set come with Prometheus and
It does
the,
not. It does not.
okay.
There is somebody selling it bundled on Amazon, but the problem is on Amazon it has the box set, but it says DVD, but on the picture of the box it says Blu-ray, and that's the only like inventory item available on Amazon. So I may just have to go search for it on eBay.
So if you would have given me a little bit of prep time here, I could have grabbed mine off the shelf and made sure we were talking about the
All
same
right.
set here. So maybe we'll have a little bit of a off the book sale going on at the end of this episode. So anyhow, gentlemen, we've got plenty of news to talk about tonight. But before we dive into stories of this week, I want to come back to the story that was breaking last week. We got a couple actually that were breaking last week while we were recording. And we'll talk about actually both of those tonight. So the first one is again we've got the Activision Bungie separation that they have parted ways, have ended their 10-year contract. We get a little bit of a follow-up this week. We have some press release from Luke Smith from Bungie talking about moving forward. We also get some Activision shareholders kind of creating or at least raising some questions about some investigations into this separation from the Securities and Exchange Commission. So they filed a report or a request to look into the separation. And so part of that maybe is just a matter of tracking down and seeing making sure that everything was above board. Some of it also from the stockholders perspective is potentially the lack of I don't know, productivity within some of Activision stock, and this I think ties right into where this is probably more of an amiable split than either one side might want to admit.
You're
But
you're being
Agassicles,
you're being much more polite than I am. I think it's just a case of shareholder butt hurt, in my personal opinion.
ah, see, but why would they? So here's my question: Why would they have that butt hurt? Because it's not like Bungie was reaping in a lot of revenue for Activision, that they've sunk a lot of money into that franchise, and I don't know that they've recouped the type of Activision money that they were hoping for.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kotick is so Activision is so extreme in their desires for revenue and earnings, and it almost defies like what we generally think of as acceptable knowledge of economics in terms of where their expectations are in comparison, even in comparison to their very close brethren EA, who also have a relatively extreme view of earnings and whatnot. But Activision is something different. I still overall feel like the Destiny franchise is inherently successful. It may not be the bonkers degree of success that Activision wants, but at least this small bit of it, which is the part that I think is the biggest deal, at least to gamers. But I think the shareholder call for an additional investigation is just because the stock simply shaved a lot more in cost or price value than they expected. They were expecting a little bit they were expecting the stock price to be a little more insulated, I think, against loss after the announcement than it turned out to actually be.
Yeah, that stock price dropped about $5 per share after the announcement. It was trading up around 51 and dropped down to just about 46.50 prior to the announcement. And again, this is a week out, so it's very possible here. Now I almost need to look it up here and see what we're trading at, but still, even right now today, it is at 47. So it hasn't bounced back a whole lot in that week, and it has definitely taken a downward trend from prior to the announcement. I think it is interesting, and I'm curious on your perspective, right? We talked about this a little bit on the podcast last week with Swiss and Prime related to this. Is this a beneficial split from a creative standpoint? Is this a beneficial split from a financial standpoint? I think there's a lot of attention that was played to Bungie, but I wonder on the Activision side, is it, what this means for them. We've already plenty of times for the last couple of years talked about how thin their catalog is. If you're thinking about it in terms of kind of making that Activision degree of money, there's not a whole lot in that catalog anymore that they've held on to, right? As Skylanders has faded, it was profitable, but is still not their profitable, right? We've seen them burn through Guitar Hero. Other than Call of Duty at this stage, what comes next from that perspective?
Yeah, and I honestly don't know, right? The thing with Activision is this, in my opinion, this largely makes them a company that is predominantly Blizzard and mobile, and that's kind of it in Call of Duty. And you have to wonder at a certain point, well, if Call of Duty is really only like 10% of their portfolio, how long do they hold on to that? I mean, maybe they continue holding on to it just because they do, but it would seem that it would be potentially an equally smart move to just go ahead and get rid of that, just based on the inefficiency of having this one franchise amongst a lot of your other things that is not the same. Yeah, it's just really weird, the difficulty for me and what I don't understand. And again, because the way Activision approaches things kind of defies the normal logic that we would apply, is I would think that you would want to hold on to Destiny because it just makes you relevant in the gaming space. I guess there's an argument that Blizzard is relevant, but with World of Warcraft definitely being in the sunset phase, somewhere between maintenance and sunset, World of Warcraft is not wowing anybody anymore. It's not a big deal, and even the what looks now, when we look back at that period of history, as a relatively brief explosion of MOBAs, even Blizzard's battle wagon of MOBAs is even on the wane as well, with one really keeping them on the horizon and the others kind of having faded into mediocrity. Overwatch continues to be big, but I mean, so that's one game, and really, if you have Overwatch and Call of Duty, and Call of Duty is, at least right now, if we talk about that as being only a multiplayer game, if you have Overwatch, Call of Duty, and Diablo, that kind of just makes you epic games, like at best, and you're maybe arguably still getting spanked by Epic because Fortnite is probably clearly larger. So I don't know what Activision's whole point of existence is right now, right? Other than really, if this is a plan to pivot hard to mobile, or could it possibly also be like the rise in preeminence of Blizzard in that partnership, right? Today it's called Activision Blizzard. With the loss of Destiny, to me, it's clearly Blizzard Activision, because I don't know how relevant the Activision brand name is right now.
I think that's a very good point, right? And I can remember even 2 years ago having conversations, looking at their financials, where King was making up 40% of their revenue, right? At the year that Overwatch came out, that was, I think the Activision side of that three-tiered stool was only in the teens in terms of the percentage that it was making up. There wasn't a big. It was also a year when Call of Duty did not perform well. It was also a year when Destiny was only releasing kind of their last expansion. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of some of this. And I here's the thing I'm wondering about, and I've heard this at some other places as well, so I won't take complete credit for it. But so with all the kind of CEO and corporate leadership turnover in Activision and Blizzard at this stage, how much pressure, Blizzard always used to be the we'll ship it when it's ready type of house. And we've seen Activision exert that type of pressure to Bungie in terms of making sure they hit a schedule. I wonder with some of the new leadership under Blizzard if given the thin portfolio with Activision that they end up getting pulled into that, hitting our timelines and making sure we have releases within certain quarters of each fiscal year.
Well, I think the reality is whether it's Blizzard or Activision, and it's just, again, it's kind of weird because Destiny 2 was flipping to this model as well. Really, maybe arguably championed or pioneered it. Maybe one thing that we can say about Activision and Blizzard is clearly the future is the season pass model. And so that starts making the hitting of a date for a big 200 to 300 person development team, huge, production, 4 or 5 years in the making. That makes that less of an issue. Now the question becomes, how much longer can Diablo 3 hold on as a key property in that space? It's a bigger deal now that it has deployed on Switch. I would almost think that having it on Switch and having it gain traction means maybe let that roll for a season, maybe 2, and then get out a Diablo 4. Of course, that makes their announcement of the newest Diablo property being a mobile game a little bewildering, unless that's just there to kind of allow them to hold position until a Diablo 4 is actually ready to release.
I think the Diablo Immortal is going to end up being, as you just said, right? It's their pivot into mobile. It's going to end up probably being the most profitable Diablo in Blizzard's history, and probably because of the microtransactions, whatever they end up being through NetEase. So anyhow, so I think that kind of wraps us up in terms of coming back. I know that we're going to end up coming back to this because there's still going to be ripples about this, what this looks like related to release schedules, what this looks like related to what comes next for Activision. Gascles, do you have anything else to say related to this news story?
Yeah, I guess I do have to ask. So, do you really? I mean, what's your? And I'm not questioning it, but what's your rationale for Diablo Immortal being big on mobile? Because I guess part of my question is I don't know that we've seen a thing that permits a belief or a perception in a direct correlation between gamers, like console gamers and PC gamers, also dive deep and play big on mobile, right? I don't know that conversion rate is that high, and Diablo is principally a PC gamer franchise, right? So I just don't, when I think about who PC gamers are, I'm like, so are those people going to be playing Diablo Immortal on mobile, or does the Diablo franchise and the Blizzard name have enough market cachet with the casual gamer for that to translate into mobile sales? My feeling is neither of those are true. So it feels like Diablo Immortal is going to release and is going to kind of languish, right, hidden under the blankets of PUBGs and Fortnite on mobile.
So I think I can see that point. I think where I'm coming from is that the Blizzard cachet, the name carries enough weight internationally that this is going to be a big revenue generator for them. If I think about the Asian markets, I think about the long history of StarCraft and the connection to the Blizzard name, the Warcraft name in China. I think there is a lot there that this is this is, I'm perfectly fine saying that this is not a Diablo game for PC gamers. But I don't think that,
or for American Western gamers, right? I think that's
sure,
fair to
that's
say. I follow you. This is the movie doesn't have to do well domestically. What we really care about are the international ticket sales.
That's exactly right. Yep. I think in this, I mean, it's an interesting place to think about it as a video game market, because for so long we've talked about it in terms of the Japanese market, we've talked about it in terms of the European market and the North American market, and now within the mobile sphere, there is a whole other aspect here that doesn't actually get tapped into a lot of times within those kind of traditional video game console, even PC gaming zones. So that's where my thought process is at that. Prime, do you have anything to weigh in here? Do you have you had a chance to talk about this a little bit last week, but any other further thoughts on it? Have you had a chance to go back and start playing a little bit of Destiny to see what this trickles out for?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to go back and play Destiny. I just want to say it's going to be the Pacific Rim of of game series. It'll have its maybe it'll be big, kind of all right here, and then overseas it's gonna be huge. But no, I guess that the other thing too is there was a lot of backlash. Excuse me, initially when it was announced, so I mean that might hurt it a little bit too. Although that's just gamers being gamers. They get a little, as I guess he says, butthurt, and then they're gonna they're gonna go out and buy it anyways. So I'm assuming it'll probably do pretty well here anyways, but we'll have to see. I'll probably check it out. I mean, I'm not a huge mobile gamer, but there's some few games here and there that I'll play. Almost daily. Like Pokemon Go and stuff like that. Just kind of those rinky-dink games. But this is more of, I'm assuming it would be more of a meaty game. That you're gonna get into, and I'm assuming it's gonna be more or less like the regular Diablo games from the past. So we'll have to see how it goes.
All right, so let's move on to our next news story. And again, I bet we're going to come back to this one when things are finalized. But this past week, there was a news item both in the gaming press, but also in the Wall Street Journal related to the finalization, or at least the progress toward a finalization of a buyout for GameStop. So the Wall Street Journal has reported that there are two companies that were kind of investment companies, Apollo Global Management and Sycamore Partners, uh, looking at kind of vying for GameStop. And so I think the story here is what, as we just got done talking about the changing market, right? And where GameStop's, or what their future looks like, that they've had a third quarter loss of almost 500 million. There's always some good December sale. Their fourth quarter usually picks up given the holidays, but their stock price is it kind of has bounced back up here after the holidays a little bit, but right before the holidays it was dipping down significantly for a year-to-date low, but they've been still kind of relative in that $15 $16 range from last year to this year, so not a whole lot of growth, definitely trending on the loss end on GameStop. So my question is one, there's been plenty of rumors related to this, so this part isn't a surprise. But the surprise to me is, what does somebody get out of an investment of GameStop in the direction that the gaming marketplace has changed, and the thin margins around some of the collectibles that GameStop has tried to populate itself with? Where's the what's the future here, other than is this a Toys R Us, we're going to buy it for the sake of the name brand at some point in time, or is there a market here? Prime, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just had a question first. They had bought ThinkGeek, right, at one point.
Yes, GameStop, yes.
Yeah. Was that last year, or has that been a few years now, or a
It's
couple
been a
years?
couple years now that they've had their
Okay.
ThinkGeek boxes, and trying to get into that crate and
Collectible.
craftability sale. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering, because I don't know if that would kind of obviously deal a blow to their bottom line there. If they obviously even buy a company, sometimes things kind of go down. But it's been a few years, and I mean it's possible. that they're just, and then they did, weren't they doing like a game? They were trying to be game devs too or something at some point, or publishers or something.
Yep. Yeah, they had their studio. There was, what was that? The Sea Below or something like that. There was like two games that they published. Deformers was another one. So they, you know, had a couple small little indie games that they were trying to diversify in. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back here in terms of kind of their revenues and their stock prices that uh, starting in 2016, they really have taken a strong decline. From 2015, they were at an all-time high, or at least a 5-year high, and they're $30 short of that at this stage. So it's really been a 3-year slide. And part of that is, right, I think part of that is the failure of that Game Dead studio that has been Heroes and Deformers were two of their ones that they put together, and then also the ThinkGeek, acquisition and integration there. So I think that they're,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
guess, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, they're fully integrated with that ThinkGeek. Because if you've been in one of those stores lately, I mean, it's just like almost half of 3/4 is like just stuff everywhere. Not just games, but like toys and dolls and all those little things that ThinkGeek sells. So it's just kind of weird when you go in there now.
Yeah, and this is, I think, one of the things I'm thinking about related to this is that if, from an investment standpoint, I would think that they're going to start shuttering stores. I mean, that there are GameStops popped up all over the place, right? And I
Yeah,
wonder what that overhead looks like in terms of trying to keep their foothold in every strip mall and shopping mall across the nation. And so I think that this, the other piece of this, I also do wonder about is, as we're talking about international pieces, right? Because we get GameStop also ties in with EB Games, and that brand still carries some cachet to the north in Canada and some other places. So there is some, a couple different pieces that come along with this, and I wonder where that, you know, where that angle is for whatever that investment company looks at.
yeah.
So
I mean, it could be. I mean, just on the business side, it could be them trying to, maybe they're with these two companies they're talking to. They're saying, hey, buy us, give us, give us some money, give us a chance that we can try to, build back up. And I've seen that before. I've been to companies like that. Unfortunately, usually it doesn't matter. It doesn't doesn't do anything. But I mean, that could be one of the rationales. I mean, another one, they could just be like, you know what, we're giving up now. I mean, they've changed CEOs twice now. I mean, the first one I guess had he had passed away. The original was it Paul Raines, um, he who got replaced by Michael. See his name here, Mahler, and he only lasted a few months. So now they got another CEO. So maybe he's just throwing in the towel, saying, all right, just buy us and we'll see what happens, or sell us off. That happens too a lot of times. These investment companies come in and just start selling pieces of the company, here and there. And obviously they have ThinkGeek, they have EB Games. Maybe they can just spin them off and just in Europe and Canada, wherever they're at. So I mean, there's a couple different scenarios.
I guess, Cleese, you've been sitting on this. You've been staring at your screen related to some things related to the GameStop here. So, what are your thoughts? Is this a wise investment? Where is there a profitable angle, or is this a last-ditch effort for a failing industry, or at least a segment of the physical games marketplace?
Yeah, I feel like this is like watching Old Yeller when I was like a 7-year-old kid, right? Um, and like I'm just wishing somebody would just shoot the damn dog. So, I don't. I mean, every single major publisher and every single console maker, except for Sony, has basically announced an intention in the following generation to go hard towards digital distribution and games as a service. Um, Maybe you could also say Nintendo hasn't quite said that yet, but I mean, Xbox is pushing it hard, and there's threats of other companies that are in adjacent markets making the same kind of incursion, right? Amazon and Google, who bring the powers of a platform in terms of content delivery that Sony just simply will never be able to match. it's clear the writing on the wall is that the brick and mortar retail shops are going to go away. And over the years, we've seen GameStop like try and bolster their loss of game sales by like starting to sell used electronics, and as Prime mentioned, partnering with ThinkGeek and turning the stores into a tchotchke store. I don't know. I don't know what somebody's thinking when they're thinking they're gonna invest in it, and they feel like they're scooping up something on the cheap that they'll be able to turn around and resell to a different retail chain. Maybe they think that they have a business model that they can pivot into that will make it sustainable for a couple years until the PlayStation 5 and Xbox 360 X2 or whatever it is, Xbox Scarlet arrive. I don't know. I mean, I will say, right, for us to be surprised that there are companies vying for GameStop, it can also be said that the media has only picked up on 2 companies that are in the running, which means it's not a massive appeal sell-off, and there's not like 10 companies vying for yes, there are 2 people vying for it who we question why, but it looks like they're the only 2 that are vying for GameStop.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable piece there, is that this is not a hotly, there's not a whole lot of bids coming in. This is not a big financial piece. If this was creating a stir in terms of investment, it would get a lot more press within the business media as well, and not just kind of, here's GameStop's what could be kind of death throes of trying to salvage things.
So just a quick question, and this is kind of an aside. I don't know if you guys used GameStop a lot, or did you in the past, or gone in there?
Yeah, I mean, before digital distribution, became viable, and I would even say because we started seeing full size games being available at the tail end of Generation 7, right?
Yep.
I mean, so I didn't really participate in it then, and I didn't participate at the outset of Generation 8. I mean, I was just accustomed to, hey, it's Tuesday, a new game is coming out. Let me make a plan to, let me schedule time in my day to do a stop by GameStop on the way home from work and grab whatever the new title is. So yeah, I mean, it used to be the primary place that I would go to buy games.
Yeah, I still get Game Informer coming every month, so I'm still there. At least I have been for the last couple years, and probably on and off for the last decade or so. So yeah, I used it during the holiday Christmas shopping, and mainly to flip games. But it's not necessarily my primary spot to go and buy something. But it's, as I'm price comparing, it certainly lines up, right? And I think one of the challenges is that sometimes there has been, exclusive content to GameStop, and whether that's, originally it started as physical things, right? I have a couple things on the DS that were physical and exclusive to GameStop content, but now as things have gone more and more digital, the the license and what they must pay to get some of those, the value there has probably decreased along the way as well. How about
Yeah.
you, Prime? Do you still use GameStop, or where's your thought process here?
No, I didn't. Not really. I never really used GameStop. I was more of a Toys R Us guy, and when Target and Best Buy came around, I kind of gravitated toward them. Every once in a while, I might go there because I usually had one, and still have one, like really close to the jobs I had. So, like you said, there's like a million of them. They're, not quite Starbucks, but they're out there though. I mean, you can find them pretty easily. So, but no, I was just asking if you, it was kind of an aside question, and just thinking about it, like I guess Clee said, they're kind of getting, getting from 2 different fronts. So you got like the digital downloads that you can do, but then also now obviously the streaming is starting to ramp up a little bit. You got Project Stream from Google, and then obviously Xbox has their service, X Cloud, I believe it was called, that they're trying to get started up. We hear rumors from Amazon now, and Verizon's getting into the act, although that might be just more mobile stuff, but still, I mean, it's games that it's going to take away from their business. So, I mean, I never had any problems. I saw a lot of flack out there with their, obviously, when you trade in games, it's not you don't get the best return a lot of times. You know, they have the deals and stuff. Like if they're, I forgot what their rewards program was called. I forgot, or like
I
their,
think it's just pro rewards. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So I mean, they started doing that, and you know that was a little bit better because you got deals and stuff, and there was always, you know, like, you know, you get 40, 50%, 60% more, you know, on your game when you trade it in. But I mean, for the average Joe, it was usually pretty, you know, pretty lame as far as the money you're getting back. Which, you know, I mean, they got to make money, I suppose. So, but you know, it's still kind of sad to see, you know, another game store kind of like that, you know, going the way of the dodo. You know, it's just, you'll only see like these kind of mom and pop places probably coming up here in a few years, 5, 10 years, definitely 10 years from now. So it's just kind of sad to see.
I think the mom and pop piece would be an interesting angle of if that's something that does see a resurgence after kind of GameStop pushed a lot of those places out of business because of kind of the availability that they could provide, where the selection at a mom and pop local shop was never as strong, or the prices weren't as competitive because GameStop had that infrastructure.
Yeah,
But
and the one thing about the mom and pops too that I notice a lot, is they always have like, something going on, something game related. It could be video game, it could be like tabletop games and stuff like that that they have going on. You know, tournaments for like Mario Kart and Smash Brothers, and you know, just all those kind of tournaments that they have going on. And I thought that was always kind of cool. That was kind of different than, you know, I never seen that from GameStop at all. You know, doing that kind. Although their stores are usually pretty small, so can't really do much, I suppose. But still, they could think about doing that maybe.
yeah, I always wonder about those types of things in terms of same thing like at a comic book shop, like how much revenue does that, you know, bringing people in, does that, other than, you know, getting people in your doors, does it always guarantee a certain amount of sales, or is it just filling space?
Yeah.
So I'm sure we will come back to this because once this deal is announced, we're going to get some more information about what it actually is and what it means going forward. But yeah, I think that we are, again, just like the conversation related to the, you know, international marketplace for games and mobile games. We are also in this kind of changeover of the era of swapping games at, you know, swapping games in your dorms, swapping games on the playground. That idea of being able to have those physical discs and trade those up and out is going the way of the dodo, as you said. I think the one other piece, Prime, that you brought up that I didn't really think about, and it will be interesting to see how this plays in, is that as you get things like PlayStation Now and Game Pass, where they're filling a lot of back catalog with older games, that idea of picking up, you know, GameStop's 5 or 4 games for $20 or whatever deal for their, you know, bargain bin games, those are the types of things that are getting scooped up for licenses in these streaming services as well. And so I think that also cuts into to some of where they would see kind of the long tail on some things. So plenty more to talk about, I'm sure, but we've got a couple other quick hits tonight related to the game news of the week. So last week, as we were recording, and on that day, there was the announcement from EA related to their second cancellation of a Star Wars game. And again, this is the same game that they had canceled, but they were going to reuse some assets. So Prime, you've got this story here. This was the one that Visceral was working on, that then got moved over to another studio, and then Amy Hennig left that studio. And now, what type of game was this going to be from EA, and what does it mean going forward?
Yes. So EA and Star Wars, like water and oil, I swear. They just can't catch a break. I don't know, you know, what happened here. But yeah, so this was supposed to be a third person, or I'm sorry, an open world action game. And supposedly from some of the reports that are coming out, basically you play a bounty hunter or some kind of scoundrel, as they call it. And you know, you visit different worlds, and you know, it'd be just like a big open area that you can go around and, you know, do missions and, you know, cause mischief or whatever you want to do. Yeah, and it did start off in Visceral, and then obviously Visceral Games was closed back in 2017, and then that moved over to I believe it's EA Vancouver, which let's look at here. I think that with Amy Hennig.
That was with
Or was
Amy
that she was
Hennig, and
Visceral?
then they had also, no, Amy Hennig was EA
She was
Vancouver,
Vancouver. Okay, and
and
then
so was Jade Raymond, I
right,
believe, that they were all
yeah,
part of that same studio, and both have moved on at this stage.
yeah. So they when they came over to Vancouver, they scrapped that game, but kind of kept the assets, like you said, and we're going to make another action game or maybe some little bit more linear, maybe type of game. Um, but obviously that's been taken away from them, and supposedly from the updates here that I'm reading on this Kotaku article, basically EA wanted something to come out a little bit sooner than I guess the projected plan for this open world game was going to be, and which was kind of weird because they say sooner and they said hopefully it was going to be like 2020. So I'm kind of wondering like how far out that game was going to be that they were actually working on. So I believe didn't they have like a 10-year agreement with Star Wars?
They do. They have a
license?
10-year. They have a 10-year license with Star Wars.
And it's been what now, like 5 or 6, maybe a little bit
Oh,
more.
it's been. I think we're pushing 7.
Okay, so yeah, so I mean, they would have been working on that pretty quickly. But yeah, that's and supposedly this project, the one they canceled, was codename Orca, which I mean, it's just a code name. But yeah, but I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I guess they want to see returns a little bit faster, and they were just like, you know what, this is not going to work. And supposedly they're still working. EA Vancouver is still around. They didn't close down the studio. They just canceled that game. And supposedly they're working on some other kind of Star Wars game. So, but they didn't really mention what that was. So we'll have to see, what happens there. And then obviously they have Respawn, who is still working on the guys from Titanfall, the makers from Titanfall. They're doing the Jedi Fallen Order game, which supposedly is, according to this article, supposed to come out sometime this year, the fall of this year. So even though we haven't heard really too much other than the title of it, so we'll see.
So, Gasicles, is this EA pulling an Activision and waiting for kind of those big payouts, or is this cutting their losses and trying to salvage basically the sunk cost fallacy, right? That they're not even going to, it's not worth putting in any more money because they're not going to create a product that's going to sell? Where, I think this is saw this as well. I don't know where, there's been some of the news stories, or at least some of the Reddit posts along looking at comparing the 10 years of EA's license and 2 games versus the 10 years of the mid 2000s with Lucas, and all the different games that were created there. Granted, more doesn't always mean better, right? It just means more. Is this a surprise, or what's next in the trajectory for Star Wars and EA from your perspective?
I mean, it is a surprise to me, and I'm not a big, super huge like Star Wars gaming fan, so it's a surprise to me simply in that it happened so quickly after the shutdown of Visceral. But when I put all the pieces together, it's actually really not that surprising, right? Because one thing is that the Visceral studio was shut down, and a lot of its employees, the employees who remained, were moved into a business unit that had oversight by Jade Raymond. Jade Raymond has also recently left EA, which would have so the whole point was they took the game, they shut the studio down, which was really more a thing of, and we talked about this a little bit, which was really more a thing of because they got rid of management, right? And then they were like, okay, now this is a matter of who has the bandwidth to manage these guys. They decided to put it in Jade's business unit. And she's a hand-picked talent, right? That hand-picked talent leaves. So now you've got this golden egg, right, that you put with a very specific goose, and now that goose is gone. So what do you do with it, right? So when I think about it from that perspective, it's not that entirely surprising. I mean, what's left for them, and what's the future and the way ahead for them with the Star Wars franchise? Again, I kind of don't know outside of Battlefront, which is a positive. I mean, I guess overall they kind of turned the ship around on Battlefront 2. It's a it's a I'm not finding a really good way to say it. I think it's a matter of they keep pounding away at it in their effort to get this more campaign oriented game rather than their big multiplayer thing, and they keep pounding at it, understanding that the clock is ticking, and at a certain point Disney is going to come through and just say, thank you very much, we'll take it from here. Here's a check for your troubles. but we'll take our property back and give it to somebody who can manage it appropriately.
Yeah, I do wonder what that looks like when this comes due, and what Disney's looking to get out of this. I mean, there's clear evidence again and again from Disney about not getting into their own video game business as they continue to pull out of things. But what type of level of profits and profitability are they looking for with this license? Or if they toss it back out, does it become a bidding war that they're in a better place to negotiate from, and see what Activision wants to pay for something like this, or some other company? Just as a fact check here, I just did a double check. Jade Raymond left. She was at Motive, so she was not at the Vancouver studio. She was at Motive, and she also yes, was handpicked talent, but then also EA had brought in somebody else over the top of Jade, which I think was also some of the news stories related to that, in terms of some additional kind of managerial pieces and shuffling. So lots of questions and problems at EA, and I think, as you said, Prime, the Respawn game is supposed to be coming out this year, and I really think that EA is hoping that it's coming out, because looking at their portfolio for the releases this year, other than their sports franchises, we've got Anthem coming in next month, and then we get a big kind of blank spot on the rest of their non-sports games. And so I'll be very curious to see what they do, and maybe Agasicles, maybe you are right that Battlefront 2 has turned it around enough that it is profitable in terms of in-game transactions. And I think probably the hope is, after the kind of botched launch around and struggles of not quite complete content around Battlefield 5, that finds some footing this year as well. So we've got, actually, I'm going to jump here to Battlefield 5, because you've got a news story about that. So again, this was game launched in November. Actually, was supposed to launch in October. Launched in November, got pushed back. Came without some of all the war story missions, the firefight mode or firestorm, whatever it is, the battle royale mode still isn't coming yet. It's coming sometime this spring, but they just pushed out an update, and you've got the news story related to that, don't you, Gasicles?
Well, I don't really know that I would call it a news story. So, in general, a patch came out which had a bunch of new weapons, and key amongst it is technically a new mode, but it's not really a new mode. It's I'm not quite certain how to describe it, but it basically took one of the modes that had been in the game and squad enabled it, basically. So it's so I don't know. It's new missions, new objectives, and an additional squad mode. I guess the reason why I actually put this in the rundown, and I was hoping I would be able to find something to corroborate it, but I haven't been able to. But supposedly there, I guess I will only call it a rumor at this point, is supposedly Electronic Arts / DICE is very dissatisfied. Well, there supposedly there was some negative feedback about the Lightning Strikes mode, to the point that I have heard a pretty strong rumor in the gamer and streamer community, that the additional mode is going to be actually pulled, or reworked, which is not at all kind of surprising with the approach to Battlefield 5. EA, they've had components that were delayed. They're doing the staggered rollout of additional content, and they have definitely gone back and tweaked a thing which was present in the game, in an ongoing update based on player complaints. So that was the main thing I wanted to mention about it, was the notion that it may be pulled.
I think that is actually probably the most interesting part of this update, because when you put that out here, I'm like, oh, there's a new update. That's great. It doesn't seem any real big, modes. The 2 teams of 16 with the squad conquest certainly is an additional mode. The lightning strike piece, but that lightning strike piece related to pulling it, I think, is a really interesting. And one, is this Is this because Battlefield 5 is struggling, and it's struggling to find a foothold not only within sales but also within a streamer and influencer community, which has historically been pretty good for DICE and Battlefield? Or is this DICE kind of taking a model from Epic and from kind of more nimble and modern game development and saying, this is a live game. This is not the Battlefield of old where you get what you get, and we're gonna be pulling and putting stuff up and pulling it back down and tweaking and not treating it as a finished product. And if that's the case, does the Battlefield community respond to that, or are they, you know, so talk to me more about what you're hearing in the streamer community related to this mode, and maybe why it's being uh, kind of where it's getting kind of put down, or where it's struggling, and what that means.
Yeah, and I can't give you any specifics. Unfortunately, this news hit. So what was going on with me is the week before this news hit, I was playing Battlefield 5 pretty steadily, and so I had occasion to have conversations with people, but this past week that hasn't been what I've been playing, so I'm a little bit out of the know. In fact, the day this update arrived, I was supposed to be playing and live streaming Battlefield 5, and I actually dropped and pivoted and went to a new game because when I went in, this update was sitting there, and so I couldn't get to the game. So I'm not exactly certain. It probably has something to do with the ways you squad in to the map, because in Battlefield 5, what happens is when you get killed and you start going into the rolling squads, you can either just drop in at one of two, sometimes three drop points that are available on the map, or you can respawn on a squad, which is, there's a certain set of parameters that have to be satisfied in order for you to do that. But spawning on squad gives you the ability to much more rapidly re-engage the enemy and pick up from where you left off. So the only thing I can guess with this lightning strikes problem is that I mean the generic problem with Battlefield 5 is that there's a bunch of cheesy, not glitches, but there's a lot of things you can get away with in the game. In particular, I think the thing that I see most prevalently, even though I frequently take advantage of it, is that weapons that you would think are supposed to be close quarter battle weapons, like short snub nose submachine guns and pistols, seem to have the exact range as like an Enfield combat rifle from World War II. Like I easily spray like small caliber submachine guns and strike people on the other side of the map, or like from ridiculous. The shotgun distance is like pretty kind of ridiculous. So
that's a Battlefield. That's a Battlefield staple, though. So I remember in Battlefield 1 getting shot from across the map with a pistol. I'm like, come on, man, really?
Right. And the bullet sponge effect and that kind of thing. So yeah, I wish I had more specifics on this, and unfortunately, I kind of departed. I mean, this was like the last thing that I heard about this particular thing as I was moving on to play something else.
So when this came out, like actually before this came out, there was kind of a little bit of talk about it, just because it was kind of something different, and they were kind of playing around with the history, obviously, of when this is taking place, World War II. But after that, well, during the release, and then after that, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of talk like at all about this game. I know. Well, the big thing for me was the Firestorm mode, which is the battle royale mode, and I mean, they haven't even showed anything of that, I don't think, as far as I know. So I mean, I don't know how this game is doing, even. Like I haven't really seen it too much in the numbers, like in the, well, I guess it came out November, I believe. So I mean, it's only had like a month and a half or so, 2 months at the most. But I don't know, it just doesn't seem like there's a big, there's been a lot of talk about this game, like kind of Battlefield 1, since obviously they had gone back in the past from the Battlefield 3 and 4.
Well, I think that there was that concern kind of in the lead up to its release as well, is that there was, it did not have the hype of previous Battlefields. They said all the right words about no loot boxes, and tried to kind of back out of the hole they created in 2017 related to Battlefront. But it is, and maybe this is. I'm curious on your experience, Agassicles, given kind of the streamer community and the conversations that you might have had. But it really feels within kind of, and I don't know where the numbers are on Twitch right now, but it feels like it's kind of just landed with a thud, and people, it is not resonated in a way that former battlefields have.
Yeah, no, I mean, in my, you know, walking around the community, I mean, I've come across one streamer who plays Battlefield 5 fairly regularly, or at least was for a period of time. They played on Xbox, and other than that, like maybe one other. I think I do know one other streamer who's been streaming it, but like other than that person and me, I don't know anybody else who's playing this on a regular basis. Right. This also being one of only, I think the only game that was released in 2018 that had ray tracing in the code. And so it would actually take advantage of the new Kepler architecture NVIDIA GPUs. And that conversation still isn't like very, very vocal, right? We're, in the past we may have thought that it would be.
So right now, I am looking at Twitch. There are 1,500 viewers on Battlefield 5 streams, which is right up there with World of Tanks, which is right up there with Gears of War 4. So 1,000 viewers is less than Super Mario 64, less than PUBG Mobile, way less than I am down here. FIFA 19 has 39,000 viewers right now. Call of Duty Black Ops has 34,000. Right? I mean, this is this is not the hundred thousands of Fortnite or League or Dota. So the drop off from their what has been their historic competitor with Call of Duty from 34,000 current viewers on a weekday night, right? This is not a big time, but the fact that I have to scroll all the way down toward the bottom of, Fallout New Vegas, Heroes of the Storm, which we talked about earlier in the podcast, which is on kind of, had its esports rug pulled up from under it and is no longer being supported and put into kind of a stasis mode, has 1,400 viewers, and it's right there with Battlefield 5. So, yeah, I think the health of this community, unfortunately, is probably going to be a question and a story going forward. Any other thoughts related to Battlefield 5 before we kind of continue to knock it down and stick it in a corner? But I do hope that it finds a foothold somewhere. From what I've played, and I do own it on Xbox, and I enjoy the multiplayer. But I gotta say, have you on the Xbox? So I'm playing this on Xbox One X on a 4K TV, and I go to the first war story, the stealth mission aspect. I'm down in the ground and I'm crawling, and I am looking at 2008 level pixels and kind of textures on the flat plants that I'm staring at, and this is on a 1X on an HD 4K. Yeah, so again, I'm not gonna I'll take a step off my soapbox here, but I was very surprised at that, and not only disappointed, but just surprised. I mean, this was a Battlefield usually is a graphic powerhouse. So
yeah, and so I guess the one thing I will mention about the squad contest mode is it's two 4-person squads on each team, and you can only respawn on your HQ. So in this mode, they take away your ability to squad spawn. I would imagine that might be part of the problem of it encountering friction out in the community, because what it means is that you can only spawn at those 2 or 3 designated points that there are on your map, and as the battlefield shifts, it could get to a point where the action is going on all the way on the other side of the map, and you always spawn back at your HQ, and now you have 25 miles of virtual distance to run to get back to the battlefront.
Yeah, that really changes the dynamic of what traditional Battlefield is, and it also sounds very similar to some of the criticisms leveled at Battlefront to the other year, 2 years ago, with not having a spawn squan or a spawn on me, but having to be spawned back at a deployment location. So I'm going to hit my final news story here as we're coming up on our hour mark. So again, we're just looking at some Twitch numbers and some big games. And Fortnite, as usual, finds its way into the news, but this time it finds its way into the news via Netflix. So this got picked up on a number of gaming sites, but actually I'm going to pull this one from the Washington Post because it got picked up in financial and other places, Bloomberg, it got picked up in a number of places, given the fact that it was Netflix who's coming out talking about their earnings. And in a statement that they say that they compete, quote, "We compete and lose to Fortnite more than HBO." That there are thousands of competitors within this highly fragmented market vying to entertain customers. So I think the reason that this is newsworthy is one that on the Netflix end, years ago, not even less than 5 years ago, they were comparing themselves and they wanted to be HBO before, they wanted to beat HBO to the punch. This is where Netflix has invested a lot in their original content. But I think it also talks about the marketplace and, the comment we just looked at in terms of streams. Twitch right now, there's 100,000 people watching Fortnite on Twitch, on 183,000 people watching Fortnite on Twitch. So, those are some pretty good numbers. Concurrent people, right? This is where Netflix, I think, starts to see some of those challenges of where and what the future markets look like in terms of where they're getting their streaming entertainment. So I think that's why I wanted to throw it out here. I don't know that it's necessarily a Fortnite story, but it's more about where their kind of entertainment time, their screen time, user screen time is being spent, not only playing but viewing as well. Gentlemen, any final thoughts on any of these news stories this week, or something else that popped up on your radar that we didn't have a chance to cover tonight?
No, and I think the Netflix Fortnite story. I know they're kind of dabbling, if you want to say that, with kind of gaming shows and games because they had the Minecraft story mode that they released, I think in this November, December, or somewhere around there, which is just a full game that was on consoles and everything like that. It was the first season because I think there's 2 seasons. I know they were supposed to have a Stranger Things game from the makers of like The Walking Dead and stuff like that, I believe. I don't know if that was ever going to actually be on Netflix, but I know it's supposed to be, out there. And they said they're, when that studio closed down, that they're still looking at other, possible other companies to try to pick that up. They just released the was it Black Mirror episode, I believe, or movie, if you want to call it that, where it's kind of like the choose your own adventure type of thing. So there's branching storylines and like I don't know, like at least 5 different endings that you can get to depending on what you choose. So
No, I've heard there's like 30 some different endings, right? That this was
okay.
shot in such a way that there's so many different endings that it is designed to create, multiple views.
Yeah, so they're kind of dabbling in it, and I mean they got they got a good point. You got what it says here. Was there like 100,000 or 100 million people that are registered, and about 80 million that log in each month? So I mean those are big numbers. So I mean they definitely want a piece of that to hopefully try to get on their Netflix ecosystem at some point. But we'll see.
Yeah, anything on your end, Agassicles, before we wrap up tonight?
No, not really.
So what else is on the schedule for the E2KG network this week? Last night we had the comic book podcast, correct? And what's coming up for the next couple days?
So tonight we're obviously recording this show right here. And then later this week into the weekend on the 26th, Saturday at 9:30 p.m., we will be doing a live show episode of It's Another Thing, episode number 10. It's Another Thing is our podcast that covers short season format television. So any TV which runs from like 6 to like 13 episodes is kind of what Dave Pecci and I focus on. We'll be covering what might potentially be the last 2 episodes of The Gifted. Fox's live action television show covering a splinter variant of mutants and what they had been inspired to do and become by the X-Men. And then Sunday night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we are recording the next episode of It's Another Thing movies, which will be episode number 5. So It's Another Thing movies is our movie entertainment podcast, which covers movies which are newly dropping on digital services. So we track what's coming in on the digital services, and then let you know little tiny gems that we find that might be of worthy interest to you, since there's a lot of stuff that drops. Which was the comment I was going to make about the Fortnite article, and we don't have to get into it in a ton of detail, but this is proof positive and realization in the media and by a very large corporation of the thing that we talked about many a time on the I don't even remember what the name of the old podcast was on the old
Band of Gamers.
Yes, on the old Band of Gamers podcast and podcast versions that preceded that, which is this is the difficulty when you are a Renaissance gamer or a Renaissance nerd and you're into, comics, games, movies, tech, TV, right, and all these different subcategories of nerddom. You have to make choices, and Netflix is realizing that, hey, some people are choosing, instead of to come binge watch, right, the next few episodes of my Sopranos back catalog, they instead want to spend 2 hours going and watching Fortnite. So it's definitely a real threat for them. I'm very interested to see how they come around and contend with it.
Yeah, I think that is a good point, to see what they do and see how the streaming marketplace continues to mature, right? We've seen it expand, and we've seen it kind of take a number of different segments. But now the question will be what that looks like as it matures, as it stabilizes and grows. And Agassicles, you had also just a streaming podcast startup, streaming about streaming streamers, right? In terms of tech and tips. And that just launched last week, correct?
Correct, yeah. So we just recorded the first episode, the premiere episode of the Stream Cave, which will be a roughly every 2 weeks, so bi-monthly or twice monthly podcast covering the tech, software, services, culture, social issues of those who live stream games to the various services. So that is co-hosted by myself, Aaron Andrews, and Gary Ferguson. And like I said, we'll be doing that. We're trying to get that scheduled, so we're doing it once every 2 weeks.
Great. And that is an excellent segue into the rest of the E2KG network. As you said, Agassicles, about being a Renaissance nerd, and there's so many options, and we try here at the E2KG network to make sure that we provide outlets and avenues for all your fandom, your geekdom, and your opportunities to invest not only in what you enjoy, but the communities surrounding those items as well. So for myself, DBQ Hams, Agassicles Stamos, and Osiris Prime, it's been another good night talking here on Enough to Keep Going about our geekdom related to video games. So come back, join us again, leave some comments down below, but stick around on the E2KG network, because there's always going to be something to keep you engaged and to keep you going. So until next time, good night.